Can you see this, John Singlob?
Yeah, it's on the screen.
So this probably deserves its own show in the future, but I've been doing some digging on this guy lately. So this guy was like considered like a legend back in like the mid 20th century as like an anti-communist leader, like general. He was a veteran from World War II. He was like in 20 something like special forces or whatever, fought with like the French resistance, and then went on as a major general to be a founding member of the CIA, and then he was involved in Iran Contra. So what he did is he was a co-founder of this group called the Western Goals Foundation. And I won't get too deep in the weeds here, but I'll just say that basically what happens is Iran Contra, which Iran Contra was when they were using the CIA was basically like using Iran to fund rebels in Central America with Iranian weapons. They were the U.S. was flying these guys up to the United States, training them, then sending them back to Central America with Iranian guns to overthrow their governments, and they could and get involved in the cocaine trade and all that kind of stuff. It was the CIA just completely trying to conquer and create an empire in Central America. That gets exposed. Congress cuts the funding to that program. So in order to maintain the funding for that program and other programs like it, which means the CIA training and funding armed rebel groups around the world, John Siglup created this group called the Western Goals Foundation, and basically it was like Western Goals Foundation is to fight communism and fight the Soviets. And what it was is the responsibility of this group was to coordinate among these massive Christian foundations and Christian philanthropic foundations. One of them being the 700 Club, Pat Robertson, all these televangelist groups that were raising millions and like tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, and then the Western Goals Foundation was coordinating the dispersal of that money and using that money basically to fund Iran Contra after Congress had cut it off, using Christian evangelical so like grandmas in the Midwest think they're giving their money to like this Christian organization to whatever help starving kids in Africa. Really, that money is going to Iran to purchase weapons to fund and arm the Iran Contras in Central America for the cocaine smuggling industry, like trafficking industry for the CIA, which are then bringing cocaine into the United States. So this guy was a founding member of the CIA, Sigloff. So this deserves its own like greater dig on it. But what that goes to show is that I can now confidently connect the televangelist, like evangelical movement, 700 Club, Pat Robertson. I can connect all that stuff to the CIA, to the funding, to the radicalization of America, radicalizing Americas with this like Zionist idea that we have to defend Israel, protect Israel, prop up Israel, and blow up Iran at all costs. And right now, the 700 Club is pushing that idea that Iran has to die.
Yeah, dude, no, that is vital for people to have that in mind, because this is like an old, it ties right back into this effort also to turn the U.S. into a civil war, self-cannibalizing basket case, while at the same time turning it into an empire, right? Like to continue that whole thing of using it as a battering ram to destroy nations like Iran or any country. But you had this Anton Chaikin did this 3-part series in the 90s, and I recently republished it, dealing with the 700 Club and Pat Robertson, that whole thing. And there's this character who's tied. A lot of very high-level military intelligence operatives have been infused into the 700 Club, into the Prophecy Club, into like speaking to the American evangelicals and shaping their way of looking at the world and looking at the future and trying and like how do they interpret their Bible. Just like you have these Salafists and Wahhabite schools that were created to give a specific interpretation on how do you read the Quran, how do you interpret some of the metaphorical language, in what way do you act and shape your identity around something which is more geopolitical in nature. That was done in the Muslim world, but we often forget that no, this sort of thing was also done to us too. I alluded to some of the elements of how Thomas Carlyle and the New Apostolic Church were behind the creation of a lot of these, and the Darbyites were behind the creation of the rapture theology, the eschatology in the 1820s and 30s, along with a bunch of Jesuits who themselves have a certain satanic undertone at the higher levels. that created these new movements that are at first were seen as like fringe, kind of weird, Mormon, New Church of Science, Jesus Christ Scientists, like all of these weird churches were propping up. But then they became more loud, more ubiquitous, to the point that like so many of the Western, especially North American church cultures are very much tainted to varying degrees by these things that happened 150, 200 years ago even. But you have these characters in Anton Chaikin's 3-part series, like Armaman, forgot his name now, this military intelligence figure who became like a champion in the 1990s of like talking about the Federal Reserve, the Illuminati, the secret societies, all of these things, the Jewish bankers conspiracy, the protocols of Zion, and like marketing himself along with people like John Coleman, who's the Committee of 300 guy, also British intelligence, right? High level MI6 operative, becomes a big bastion of American freedom, touring America, exposing these secret societies. And if you listen to the speeches that these guys were giving to their very Christian fans and followers across America, they would always focus a lot on the South. It was the call for a civil war, basically trying to say that now is the time to take up arms the way George Washington did against the British Empire. So too we must now. And the idea of taking back control of the nation, bringing back a Lincoln policy the way Trump has been working to do, that was not even in their, that was not in their calculus. Their idea was create the civil war now, forget about the nation. The nation's a fraud anyway. And yet they were using this language. But yeah, they've been trying for a long time. It's really important to be sensitive to how we've all been played to varying degrees. The Scientologists as well are all over the place, especially in the health freedom movement. You can't walk 2 steps before you smack straight first into a Scientologist, high level OT Scientologist everywhere. Also important because this also is part of the Albert Pike occult operation. If you think about it, because Albert Pike, when he created the Southern Rite occult secret society that became the FBI, he also had a lieutenant who created John Yarker, who created the ancient and accepted rite of Memphis and Mizraim, which was what Aleister Crowley came out of, along with Theodore Royce and Rudolf Steiner. When there was part of the outgrowth of it, overlapped with the Theosophists, but this Memphis Mizraim sect, this sort of pseudo Southern Rite thing, was very, very active in both the U.S. but big time across Europe. And Aleister Crowley created out of that process the black, what do you call it? His thelema philosophy of what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. All right, do what thou willst. He created the Black Mass, and he created he took over control of the Ordo Templi Orientis as a new set of lodges that were also created by Royce and John Yarker, Pike's second in command. And the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis, had as its disciples in the California branch of the Agape Lodge, L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons. Both of them were the 2 Crowley disciples who saw themselves as the Antichrists. They were both doing like Babylon working, sex magic, other things that involved human sacrifices in the deserts of California and Arizona and shit. And Hubbard, goes on to create another UFO cult interfacing with the Mormons as well as their own thing. But that becomes Scientology. And L. Ron Hubbard's own son testified to it and gave an interview in 1981 saying, yeah, the only thing practiced in the household was Satanism. That's and he said, and he was asked by the interviewer, so did he see himself as a follower of Satan? And L. Ron Hubbard's son said, no, you don't understand. If you see yourself as Satan, you don't worship Satan. He actually saw himself as like
you worship yourself.
Yeah,
you worship yourself. You worship yourself. Yeah. Man, so I did not know that.
The rites of initiation, that was like taken directly from the Ordo Templi Orientis. He just made it operating thetan OT, but as a bit of a play on words for those on the inside, they know. But it was all based on the Eleusinian mysteries, based on the same idea of like, letting the part of yourself that's tied to nation, family, ideas of God, tradition, let that die and let a new godlike person come out, right, after a process of initiation where you've now come out as God. It's the old Kabbalistic brainwashing technique that's always been done. That's why a lot of the higher level OT operators end up dying when they go into like OT. They want to get to OT7 or OT8 land. They often die, and they die weird deaths. But it's because it's part of the initiation. You got to kind of take risks if you're gonna. You can't just pretend you're gonna die like a skull and bones initiate inside of a crypt. You got to actually take some risks.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.